What would you do if the two people you trusted most, your own wife and your own brother, betrayed you in the worst way possible? Would you seek revenge? Would you forgive? Or would you let karma take care of it? Stay with me, because this story will make you question everything you believe about family and loyalty. Ethan Carter had always been the kind of man people looked up to. A devoted husband, a loving father, a successful businessman. The kind of guy who worked hard, did right by his family, and never took shortcuts. He believed in loyalty and trust, in doing the right thing, even when it wasn't easy. And for the longest time, he thought his life was proof that good men get rewarded. He had a beautiful wife, Rachel, who had been with him for nearly 20 years. They met in college. He had been the ambitious architecture student, and she was the bright, kind-hearted woman who believed in his dreams. They built a life together, raised two incredible kids. Emily, 16, smart and sharp-eyed, always questioning the world. Lucas, 12, still innocent, still looking up to his dad like he was some kind of superhero. And then there was Nathan. Nathan was Ethan's younger brother, 8 years his junior, and the only family he had left after their parents died in a car accident when they were kids. Ethan had stepped up back then, taking care of Nathan as best he could. He worked 2 jobs, made sure Nathan never went without, put him through college, and later, brought him into his own architecture firm when he couldn't find a job. Nathan wasn't just a brother. He was a responsibility, a bond stronger than blood. For years, they had been inseparable. But lately, something felt off. It started with Rachel. At first, Ethan thought he was imagining things. She had always been affectionate, the kind of wife who touched his arm when she spoke, who kissed him absent-mindedly while passing by. But lately, those small gestures had faded. Conversations felt shorter. Her phone seemed permanently attached to her hand, buzzing at odd hours of the night. When Ethan asked who she was texting, she would smile, a forced, uneasy smile, and say, "Just the girls." But she never laughed at her messages the way she used to. Never shared funny stories about their conversations. Just a quick reply, then the phone flipped over, screen down. Ethan wasn't the jealous type. He trusted Rachel. They had been through too much together for him to question her faithfulness. But something in his gut told him something wasn't right. Then there was Nathan. For as long as Ethan could remember, Nathan had always been the easygoing one. The life of the party. Always excited to come over, always eager to grab a drink after work. But lately, Nathan had been distant. He started bailing on plans, making vague excuses. "Busy with work," he'd say. Or, "I'm just tired, man." Another time. Ethan could have let it slide if it had happened once or twice. But it was becoming a pattern. Nathan, the brother who once showed up unannounced just to hang out, was now avoiding him. And then there was Emily. She had always been observant. Too observant, sometimes. She saw things most people missed. And lately, she had been watching him, watching everyone, with this quiet, knowing look. One night, Ethan found her sitting at the kitchen table, a bowl of cereal in front of her, barely touched. She wasn't eating, just stirring, the spoon moving in slow circles, her thoughts clearly somewhere else. "You ever feel like people wear masks, Dad?" she asked suddenly, her voice thoughtful. Ethan glanced up from his laptop, raising an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" She shrugged, still stirring. "Like, they pretend to be one thing, but underneath, there's someone else. Someone completely different." Ethan frowned. "That's kind of deep for a school night." Emily smirked, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. "I was just thinking." She finally took a bite of her cereal, but she wasn't really focused on it. Ethan watched her for a moment, something about her words sticking with him. He wanted to ask if something was wrong, if she had seen something. But before he could, Rachel walked in, phone in hand, smiling at whatever was on the screen. Ethan wasn't the kind of man to dwell on bad feelings. He believed in logic, in facts, in things that made sense. But lately, nothing felt right. Rachel was slipping away from him. He could feel it in the way she avoided his touch, the way her laughter, once so natural, felt forced when she was around him. She had always been an open book, but now? Now, she was a locked vault, her phone never leaving her hand, her messages answered with quick swipes before she flipped the screen over, hiding it from view. And Nathan? Nathan was acting just as strange. One Friday night, Ethan decided to invite his brother over for a drink. It had been a while, and he wanted to catch up, reconnect. He called Nathan, expecting the usual, "Hell yeah, I'll be there in 10. Instead, there was a pause. I don't know, man. I'm kind of tired. Long week. Tired? Nathan had never turned down a drink before. Come on, just one beer. I haven't seen you in a while. Another pause. Then, a hesitant sigh. All right, yeah, I'll stop by for a bit. Ethan didn't like how reluctant he sounded. When Nathan finally arrived, something was off. He looked tense, uncomfortable, kept shifting in his seat, checking his phone when he thought Ethan wasn't looking. So, what's up with you lately? Ethan asked, keeping his tone casual. You've been avoiding me. Nathan let out a short laugh. What? No, man, just busy. Work's been crazy. Ethan stared at him for a moment. You sure that's it? Nathan wouldn't meet his eyes. Yeah, of course. It was a lie. Ethan could feel it. They drank their beers in silence after that, the usual ease between them replaced with something heavier, something unspoken. When Nathan left an hour later, Ethan stood at the door, watching him walk to his car, a knot forming in his stomach. His brother was hiding something, and whatever it was, it had put a wall between them. The next morning, Ethan woke up to Rachel already out of bed. He glanced at the clock, 7:15 a.m. It was Saturday. Rachel never got up early on weekends. He walked downstairs to find her in the kitchen, dressed in jeans and a fitted sweater, her hair styled like she was going somewhere. Morning, he said, eyeing her outfit. You're up early. Rachel barely looked at him. Yeah, I told Lisa I'd meet her for brunch. Ethan leaned against the counter, watching as she poured herself a cup of coffee. Didn't know you had plans. I mentioned it last night. No, she didn't. Ethan would have remembered. She grabbed her purse, slipping her phone inside before he could get a glimpse at the screen. Don't wait up, I might be out for a while. And just like that, she was gone. Ethan stood there for a long moment, staring at the spot where she had been. He could ignore the feeling in his gut. He could pretend it was nothing. But something told him that if he kept turning a blind eye, he was going to regret it. Rachel had been acting strange for weeks. Nathan was distant, making weak excuses to avoid him. The two people he loved most in this world, outside of his kids, were slipping away. And no matter how much Ethan told himself he was imagining things, that gut feeling wouldn't go away. So, instead of pushing it aside, he started paying attention. The first red flag came that Saturday afternoon. Rachel had left for her so-called brunch with Lisa, but something about it didn't sit right with Ethan. So, after she walked out the door, he pulled out his phone and texted Lisa himself. Ethan, hey, just checking in. Rachel said you two had brunch today. Hope you're keeping her out of trouble. A few minutes later, Lisa replied. Brunch? We haven't made plans in weeks. Ethan just stared at the screen. She lied. He felt his pulse quicken, a cold rush spreading through his chest. Rachel had looked him in the eye and flat out lied. So, if she wasn't with Lisa, who was she with? The second red flag came that night. Rachel got home late, later than she said she would. When she walked through the front door, her makeup was still perfectly done, her lips slightly swollen, her hair messy like someone had been running their hands through it. She looked different. Ethan sat on the couch, pretending to watch TV as she walked past him, dropping her purse onto the table like nothing was wrong. How was brunch? He asked, his voice even. Rachel hesitated for half a second, just a fraction of a moment, but Ethan caught it. Oh, it was great, she said, forcing a smile. Lisa and I had a good time. He didn't say anything, just nodded. She didn't ask about his day, didn't even glance at him before heading upstairs. Ethan waited until he heard the shower turn on before he moved. His heart was pounding, his hands clenched into fists. But instead of letting the anger take over, he forced himself to think. Stay calm. Focus. Something was going on, and he was done ignoring it. The third red flag came a few days later. Ethan had an early morning meeting, so he left the house before Rachel and the kids woke up. But halfway to work, he realized he had forgotten an important contract on his desk at home. So he turned around. When he pulled into the driveway, Rachel's car was still there, which made sense. She didn't leave for work for another hour. But as he stepped inside, something caught his eye. A second coffee cup. It was on the kitchen counter, still steaming, right next to Rachel's usual mug. Ethan's stomach twisted. His mind raced through the possibilities. Maybe it was Emily's? No, she didn't drink coffee. Lucas? Definitely not. He turned his head toward the staircase, just in time to hear movement upstairs. Not just one set of footsteps. Two. A wave of ice shot through his veins. Ethan moved silently, his body tense, his heart hammering against his ribs. He climbed the stairs one step at a time, barely breathing, listening. A muffled voice. A deep voice. A man's voice. The bedroom door was slightly ajar. Ethan reached out, fingers brushing against the wood, and pushed it open. Rachel stood in front of the mirror, fixing her hair, wearing nothing but a robe. And behind her, standing near the bed, buttoning up his shirt, was Nathan. Ethan's world tilted. Everything around him, the walls, the floor, the air, felt like it had been sucked into a void. His ears rang. His vision blurred. Nathan froze. Rachel turned, her eyes widening in shock. For a moment, there was nothing but silence. A long, stretched-out second where nobody moved. Then, just like that, the illusion shattered. And Ethan realized the truth. His own wife, his own brother, they had betrayed him. Rachel, standing half-dressed in their bedroom. Nathan, caught in the act, frozen like a man who knew he had just ruined everything. For a long second, no one said a word. Then, reality snapped back into focus. Ethan felt something inside him break. He had imagined scenarios, tried to rationalize Rachel's distance, Nathan's avoidance. But nothing could have prepared him for this. His wife, his brother, in his bed. Rachel finally moved first, grabbing at her robe, pulling it tighter around herself like she could somehow cover up what she had done. Ethan, he held up a hand, stopping her. He couldn't hear her voice right now. He couldn't listen to whatever pathetic excuse she was about to throw at him. Instead, his eyes locked on Nathan, the brother he had raised, the brother he had given everything to. Nathan swallowed hard. His shirt was still half unbuttoned, his hair a mess. Look, man, Ethan lunged. He wasn't thinking. His body just moved. 1 second, he was standing in the doorway. The next, his fist collided with Nathan's jaw so hard it sent him crashing into the nightstand, knocking over Rachel's perfume and a lamp. Nathan groaned, holding his face, scrambling to his feet. Rachel screamed, stepping between them. Stop it! Ethan barely heard her. His blood was boiling, rage pounding through his skull. You son of a bitch, he spat, his voice shaking. You're my brother. And this is what you do. Nathan looked at him, shame and fear in his eyes. But there was something else there, too. Something that made Ethan sick. He didn't look remorseful. He looked caught, like a thief caught with his hand in the damn cookie jar. Rachel tried to grab Ethan's arm. Please listen. It's not what you... Shut up, Ethan snapped, stepping back. His hands were shaking. His whole body was shaking. I don't want to hear it. I don't want to hear a single goddamn word from you. She flinched like he had hit her. Good. She should hurt. She should feel something. Nathan ran a hand through his hair, taking a deep breath. Ethan, man, I'm sorry. It just happened. Ethan laughed. A sharp, bitter sound. It just happened? Are you serious? Nathan wouldn't look at him. We didn't mean to. Didn't mean to? Ethan cut him off, stepping closer. You didn't mean to sleep with my wife? You didn't mean to betray your own brother? Silence. Rachel's eyes filled with tears. I swear, Ethan, You what? His voice was deadly quiet now. You love me? You never meant to hurt me? He shook his head. Save it, Rachel. I don't want your lies. She opened her mouth, but no words came. Good. Ethan turned back to Nathan. How long? Nathan hesitated. Ethan took a step forward. How long? Nathan exhaled shakily. 6 months. Ethan clenched his fists. His vision went red. 6 months. Half a damn year. For 6 months, his wife and his brother had been sneaking around behind his back, lying to his face, sitting across from him at the dinner table, laughing, acting like everything was fine. Nathan cleared his throat. Look, man, I know I messed up. Messed up? Ethan let out a breathless laugh, shaking his head. You destroyed everything. And for what? His eyes darkened. What, Nathan? Because you could? Nathan looked away. That was all the answer Ethan needed. For the first time in his life, Ethan felt something snap inside him. Something that wasn't rage, wasn't sadness. It was detachment. He was done. Rachel reached out, her fingers trembling. "Ethan, please, we can?" "Get out," Ethan said coldly. Rachel blinked. "What?" "Both of you. Get out of my house. Now." Nathan shifted uncomfortably. "Man, come on, let's talk." "Get out." Rachel shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "Ethan, please, we have a family." "And you threw it away," he said, his voice cold and steady. "I hope it was worth it." Silence. Nathan grabbed his shoes, avoiding Ethan's gaze, and rushed past him without another word. Rachel hesitated. "Please," she whispered. "I don't want to lose you." Ethan stared at her for a long moment. Then he stepped aside, giving her the same choice she had given him when she betrayed their vows. She walked past him without another word. The door slammed shut behind them, and just like that, they were gone. Ethan stood there in the silence of his now empty home, staring at the bedroom that had once been theirs. The first few weeks after Rachel and Nathan left were a blur. Ethan threw himself into work, into his kids, into anything that kept his mind from wandering back to that night. The night everything changed. Rachel tried calling at first, leaving messages, sending long texts, begging him to talk. He deleted every single one. Nathan? Not a damn word. Good. But karma had a way of handling things. Because while Ethan was picking up the pieces of his shattered life, Rachel and Nathan were discovering that betrayal had consequences. Rachel moved in with Nathan, not because she wanted to, but because she had nowhere else to go. Ethan had kicked her out of the house, and she didn't have enough money to rent a place on her own. She had never needed to. Ethan had taken care of everything. Now, she was stuck. Nathan had promised her that things would be better once the truth was out, that they wouldn't have to sneak around anymore, that their love would be worth all the pain. But love built on betrayal never lasts. At first, they tried to pretend things were fine. They went out together, held hands in public, put on a show. But underneath it all, cracks were already forming. Rachel was miserable. Nathan was nothing like Ethan. He wasn't responsible. He wasn't stable. He wasn't a man she could depend on. He was selfish, immature, a man-child who had never really grown up because Ethan had always bailed him out of his mistakes. And now, without Ethan's support, Nathan was struggling. He lost his job at Ethan's firm. Of course he did. Ethan fired him the same night he threw him out of his house. And without Ethan to carry him, Nathan realized something terrifying. He was nothing on his own. Bills started piling up. Rent wasn't cheap. Rachel's salary wasn't enough to cover everything. And Nathan? He wasn't exactly the hardworking type. Soon, the stress turned into fights. "You don't do anything," Rachel snapped one night, pacing the tiny apartment they now shared. "You said we'd have a good life, but look at us. You can't even pay rent." Nathan scoffed, slumped on the couch, beer in hand. "Maybe if you weren't so damn high maintenance, we wouldn't need so much money." Rachel's face twisted with disgust. "Unbelievable. You ruined my marriage for this?" Nathan laughed bitterly. "Oh, now it's my fault?" He stood up, closing the distance between them. "Newsflash, sweetheart. You didn't have to sleep with me. You did that all on your own." Rachel went silent. Because he was right. She had destroyed her own life. Nathan wasn't the man she had loved. He was a mistake. And now, there was no going back. Meanwhile, Ethan was moving forward. The divorce was finalized faster than he expected. He had the best lawyer money could buy, and Rachel knew she had no leverage. The house? His. The kids? His. She fought for custody at first, but Emily made it clear she wanted nothing to do with her mother. Lucas, though young, followed his sister's lead. The judge saw no reason to disrupt their lives further. Rachel lost everything. She was living with a man she no longer loved, broke, lonely, and humiliated. Nathan was spiraling, bitter, angry, drinking too much. Their happiness had lasted less than 3 months. And Ethan? He was free. For the first time in years, he could breathe. He had his kids, his business, and a future that was finally his again. Ethan always thought betrayal would leave him broken. That losing Rachel, losing Nathan, would rip out a part of him that he'd never get back. But as the months passed, something strange happened. He didn't feel broken. He felt lighter. For the first time in years, he wasn't carrying the weight of a one-sided marriage. He wasn't looking after a brother who took everything and gave nothing in return. The pain was still there, sure, but it wasn't consuming him anymore. He was healing. And better yet, he was thriving. Rachel's life, on the other hand, had completely fallen apart. She tried to keep her relationship with Nathan going, but it was like trying to hold on to a sinking ship. The thrill of sneaking around had disappeared, and all that was left was an empty, miserable reality. Nathan wasn't the exciting man she had thought he was. He was just a loser. No job, no ambition, no real future. And Rachel? She had lost everything. Her marriage, her home, and worst of all, her children. Emily still refused to speak to her. Lucas was distant. They didn't want weekend visits. They didn't want anything to do with her. She had destroyed her family for nothing, and the realization ate her alive. One day, out of desperation, she called Ethan. He saw her name flash on his phone screen and, for the first time in a long time, hesitated before declining. He wasn't angry anymore. He wasn't sad either. He just didn't care. And that was the best feeling in the world. Nathan? He didn't last much longer either. He and Rachel finally reached their breaking point. Too many fights, too much resentment. One night, she packed her bags and walked out on him, just like she had walked out on Ethan. Except this time, there was no backup plan. No husband waiting to take her back. No home to return to. Nothing. Rachel faded into the background of Ethan's life after that. He heard rumors. She moved to a smaller apartment, tried dating again, but nothing stuck. She wanted to fix her relationship with Emily and Lucas, but the damage was done. As for Nathan, without Ethan's support, he fell apart completely. He moved out of state, burned through his savings, and ended up crashing on a friend's couch. The last thing Ethan ever heard about him was that he was working a dead-end job, drinking too much, and blaming everyone but himself for the mess he had made. Ethan didn't waste a single second thinking about him after that. 1 year later, Ethan stood on the back porch of his house, sipping his coffee, watching as Emily helped Lucas with his school project at the patio table. His family, his kids, the people who actually mattered. Life had changed. He had changed. But the most important thing? He had won. Not through revenge. Not through hate. He won by letting go. By moving forward. And as he stood there, watching the sun rise over the life he had rebuilt, he realized something. The best revenge wasn't destroying his enemies. It was leaving them behind. For good.